Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the podcast where we explore the impact of the built environment on our health, our wellness, our productivity, and our general joy of being alive. And of course, we have to talk about sustainable design as well. Now, in the latter part of 2024, I was fortunate enough to have Minja Yang from the International Well Building Institute, and Minja spoke beautifully, an episode you absolutely want to listen to. She spoke beautifully about financing, healthy buildings. Today, I was fortunate enough to have Nathan Stadola. Am I pronouncing your name right, Nathan? Nathan Stadola.
That's it.
Yes, wonderful. From IWBI. And we're going to do a little bit of deeper dive on the certification itself. Okay. So Nathan, before I get you to tell us a little bit about yourself, I have to say, LinkedIn profiles are typically the profile pictures, the most stodgiest, boring pictures. But check out Nathan's LinkedIn profile sometimes because he basically has the coolest profile picture I've ever seen. Okay, let's use this opportunity for you to get the listeners to know you a little bit better, okay? Tell us about your background. Tell us about the pathway that led you to become the chief engineer at IWBI.
My background is in mechanical engineering and transportation engineering, and I finished my master's degree at Columbia University right in 2008, which was the beginning of the financial crisis. And so the jobs were scarce at that point, and related to my LinkedIn photo that you're referring to, where I'm holding an accordion in a tree. I did not go up in trees, but I certainly used my accordion, and I was a street musician for a couple of years after that, playing accordion in parks and subways and all around New York City. And you can still find me on YouTube for Renegade Accordion. That's there. So when I was not being an engineer then for a couple of years, I was playing accordion. But then eventually I started working. I was introduced to the people behind the Delos, our parent company, and at the time, 12 years ago, the only company to create wellness real estate. And there was maybe half a dozen people at the time there, and we were looking at what kind of interventions could affect the health based on the buildings that are there. And from there, it eventually grew into becoming the well building standard itself. And the IWBI was spun off from Delos as the organizer, the manager, the administrator of well. And I stuck with it throughout all of those years. Now I lead the standard development team as chief engineer at IWBI.
Oh, that's a fantastic story. I didn't realize you were, one of the trailblazers with the organization. That's really cool. And I'm very fortunate to have you here. So thank you very much. All right, let's dive right in. We have to talk about Well V2. Big picture first. What are the goals of the standard?
Yeah, Well Building Standard is the premier building standard to focus on enhancing people's health and well-being in the built environment. It's a global framework for organizations to prioritize the health of their occupants, whether those are occupants in a building that the building owner is leasing out to tenants, or it's the occupants of the space that is a workplace that's there. It is being utilized across nearly 6 billion square feet around the globe in 74,000 commercial, residential, and other sectors in 136 countries. And technically, it is called Well V2. You mentioned Well V2 to differentiate it from the standard Well V1, which is the first program that we launched more than 10 years ago. But however, since Well V2 has now been in effect for almost 5 years, it's the dominant form of the program, and it's what most people are familiar with. So we usually just use the shorthand of Well. At the project level, all the different strategies align with promoting the health benefits for the occupants, to help with recruiting, to help with productivity, to help with retaining and attracting tenants within the space. And it can help organizations better report on their environmental social governance, their ESG performance, because of its strong alignment with programs such as GRESB, the leading ESG global benchmark on real estate.
Okay, that's fantastic. All right. We're going to go into, I'm going to call it the lightning round. So there are 10 concepts that drive the standard. And we're going to talk about all 10 of them, right? And we'll try to keep it brief, but I do want to make sure that we give them all their due, all their justice. And so what I'll get you to do is briefly comment on what they mean, sort of the definition, and what you're trying to achieve in the context of the building for each one of them. You ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, we do sometimes have done 8-hour courses that cover the 10 concepts. So this will be quite a departure from that, but I'll give everyone the highlights of what you can expect and why we have each of the concepts.
All right, let's start with air.
All right, air. So you want to avoid putting bad things into the space. So minimize combustion or use low or no emission appliances, ban smoking. You want to remove bad things that are in the space with filters or air treatment to manage particulate matter, VOCs, or pathogens, and expel those as well, like with your ventilation system, which will also help your CO2 levels and sick building syndrome. And then finally, you want on-site tests to measure the space it's there, to find out what the particulate matter, the VOC, the ozone levels are. Make sure that your space is performing as effectively as you think it is in practice.
Wow, that was really good. All right, let's keep going. Water.
Water. Promote access to healthy and high quality drinking water. So this is both by making it the beverage of choice, the default beverage option, by having lots of dispensers of drinking water throughout the space, and also performing those on-site tests. Make sure that it's low in contaminants that might affect people's health, ranging from lead to disinfectant byproducts in the water. Then make sure that your water in the rest of your building is not doing any harm. So with your HVAC system or your showers, make sure you have a Legionella management system in place for that. Make sure that you're managing your moisture and mold so that water, whether it's coming in from the inside through the building envelope or through leaky pipes, is not causing any problems. And then also promote hygiene by having effective bathrooms.
Brilliant. Nourishment.
Promote fruits and vegetables and minimize processed food. Those are some of the biggest highlights that are there. And this can be for places that are offering food or just those that aren't, but have places that people can more easily bring their own food in, and rather than needing to eat food that is in the area that might not be as healthy. And we're not requiring that everyone provides fruits and vegetables. If you don't offer any food at all, you can still get certified. But if you are offering food, then that's when you need to provide these fruits and vegetables, making sure that you're not only offering things that are unhealthy.
All right, I'm going to pause on this one for a second, because
Absolutely.
I've had so much experience with, the office refrigerator with the half open yogurt container that's been sitting back there for 3 months. Are there any provisions in the standard that provide incentive or methodologies to avoid those kinds of issues?
That is a great question. I think that might be something that would be found in some of our cleaning features about having processes in place to generally manage the space, and also making it very clear what is the responsibility of the cleaning crew and what is the responsibility of the occupants, because that's often something that is missed. Everyone just assumes that someone else is going to take care of it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I love it. All right, let's talk about my favorite subject, light.
Light. So within light, we want to promote daylight, both because of the energy concerns and also by providing all of this light, you can effectively help people with managing their sleep-wake cycle. People have a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour rhythm. That's roughly 24 hours. That's why it's called circadian, circa meaning about, dia meaning day. And it needs that bright light during the day to synchronize your 24-hour cycle with the actual 24-hour cycle of the sun. So all of the daylight that you're having there is going to help with the bright days, dark nights that'll keep your system in check. Also, by having electric lights that's shining in the right way, that's shining for the light that is reaching the eye, that can help supplement this in areas that don't have as good daylight. In addition, of course, we are looking at effective light for all of your tasks, making sure the light hitting your task, the table, the floor, the hallway, is also enough that people can do their work or maneuver safely through this space. And looking at light quality, the color rendering index, so high color quality, low glare, high controllability, low flicker.
You guys have nailed it. All right, next, movement.
We want to get people on their feet and moving about. So this involves, it's called incidental physical activity, the activity of people throughout the day just doing their thing, whether this is active commuting or walking upstairs in the building or moving between different places more often, just having some activity that's there. And then also exercise, which is the conscious physical activity of actively trying to do something. And so we also encourage projects to provide exercise space to promote it through like incentive programs that are there. So those are the two big ways that we get people to move. Also within movement concept is ergonomics. So having adjustable height desks, properly adjustable chairs, and similar things like that to let people be positioned in the way that is best for their body size.
Love it. Okay, and number 6 is also near and dear to my heart, thermal comfort.
Indeed. Thermal comfort and sound are the number 1 and 2, depending on the project, complaints within the office. So it is a major concern in many buildings. So within thermal comfort, we want to create a space that, by a performance test, is shown to be acceptable thermal comfort, or at least generally acceptable per the design parameters. But we also include surveys that teams only get points if people respond that, yes, they are actually thermally comfortable within the space. There are a lot of hints within the concepts in these optimizations that are strategies that can help with this, such as greater controllability within the space, like thermal zoning, use of radiant thermal comfort that's there, and then even a couple about enhanced operable windows that can provide the outdoor air, but also either enhance or at least not diminish thermal comfort, and even looking at outdoors thermal comfort considerations to avoid things like the heat island effect.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Individual control. I have to dive a little bit deeper on thermal comfort. Does it entail individual control as well?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Some of it, like as a basis, is looking at zoning. Like if you have a lot of individual offices that they're not all on the same thermostat, you can individually select them. Or within an open office that there's different zones within that. Of course, that is a little bit challenging if you have an open space where some of it is set to one temperature, some of it is set to another. That there are other strategies in there about actually going down to the individual. This would be things like having like personal heated chairs, or have they make desk furniture where the ventilation system is built into that, and the air and not only be cooling you because it can be set to be blowing on you directly there, but that's the supply air. That is the clean air that's coming to you. So it's helpful from an air quality perspective as well.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You mentioned sound. That's the next one.
Yep. So sound is another one that has a lot of performance tests to make sure that the space is actually performing. We're looking at background sound levels to see that the space is not too noisy and distracting that's there. We're looking at the sound separation between rooms so that there's sufficient privacy and minimizing of the distractions for what might be happening in one room and blocking it from going into the other. Looking at the reverberation time, especially in large spaces, so that it's not too echoey in there, and that when the sound is produced, it does not travel and have as much of an impact. And then there are design strategies that go along with that. So we're using surfaces that have higher noise reduction coefficients to help minimize the reverberation time, for instance. And then also promoting a level of minimum background sound, such as through sound masking, which if you're in a space where you just can't manage, say, the sound that's going between walls, then it can be helpful to help cover that up with a sound masking system.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Number 8, materials.
So looking at materials, we start by making sure we don't put in anything really bad. Don't put in anything with asbestos, lead, anything like that, which in most parts of the world is almost a gimme. But in some parts, as the International Building Institute, we feel like we still have to say, you have to do this. Then if you're an older building that does have these things, like investigate, and if you need to remediate them, you get rid of that lead in your paint or that asbestos in your walls in a safe way that's there. Then start looking at moving the needle forward with some of your materials, avoiding materials such as halogenated flame retardants or ones with high VOCs that are in this space. And then also looking at material transparency, making it clear to your occupants and also to yourself that you're using products that have clearly documented ingredient content.
What about lifespan? Say like a short life material that has to be replaced constantly. You're going to have a higher embodied carbon as a result of that. Is that covered as well?
Tangentially, a little bit. One of the reasons from a health perspective to avoid that is, especially from a VOCs, is that the newer the product is, the more VOCs that it will emit. If you have a formaldehyde-heavy particle board that's been sitting in a room for 10 years, that formaldehyde is basically gone, and that's as good as a pure wood material that's there. So that in our features that's looking to minimize the, say, the VOCs in architectural products and in furniture, we say you should buy new materials that have low VOCs, or buy reclaimed materials that have already emitted. Or if you already have all of your materials already, don't go buy anything new because they already have exhausted all their VOCs. And at this point, they're good like that. So there are certain pathways within materials where the use of existing products can be helpful.
Short lifespan, single-use plastic glazing is not a sustainable solution for daylighting. Solera is the glass-based alternative for the new millennium. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Brilliant. Okay, the next one I was very curious about. Number 9 is mind.
Yeah. So in mind, we're looking at mental health, stress, and a lot of different topics that affect that. So this is things like biophilic design, like use of nature throughout the space, and different design parameters having access to a restorative space for people that are there. And then a lot of policies about promoting mental health benefits, whether that's from a health insurance perspective or it's courses on meditation and things like that. And then also on benefits related to substance abuse and helping people that might be struggling with that, just having, again, benefits available for that.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, there's this sort of neuroscience or neuroarchitecture is what, that this whole science is growing so rapidly and developing so rapidly. I'm learning a lot about it. It's truly amazing. All right, the last one, community.
Yeah. Community is all about fostering connections and a sense of belonging. So looks at creating inclusive spaces that bring people together and promote equity. So like having shared spaces that are accessible by the community, or hosting like cultural celebrations, providing time for volunteering for the occupants. It also looks at major public health topics such as emergency preparedness and health promoting policies such as paid sick leave and access to health services.
I almost want to do a slow clap, Nathan. That was so incredibly well done. I mean, first of all, the content was brilliant, but the way you responded so beautifully to the lightning round, hats off to you. That was a great job.
Thank you.
Have you ever done improv comedy by any chance, or been on stage before in an improv scenario? No, you should. You haven't, Mr. Colin, but you definitely have a gift.
Maybe I'll bring my accordion on stage too for that.
I would love that. I'm a piano player too, so we could jam. High-level overview of the verification process. Like, are you actually doing on-site inspections similar to like a post-occupancy inspection? Tell us about how that works.
Sure. So I like to say that the well building standard, the IWBI, we really have two separate but equally important goals. The first is figuring out what is the right thing to do. And that's what everything we've just talked about right now is. Like, how should you design your HVAC system? What kind of biophilic design? What policies should be there? And we could just stop there, and then we would have a white paper. Then we would say, you, the world, go do all of these things. And people would say, great, I've done some of these things. And someone else would say, I did some of these other things. And then people would say, yeah, some of the stuff has been done, probably, but we're just trusting that they have done it because they just told us that they've done it. So the second half is that third-party verification. It's setting up a system to not only say, these are the strategies, but these are how someone other than you is going to evaluate that you've done them. So every one of our features has a verification method. In fact, that's one of the 4 tenets of features that we present to our governance body, that the strategy is verifiable. And so that can be things, documentation, show us an excerpt from your employee benefits document that describes your sick leave or your paid time off. Show us an architectural drawing that shows us all of the different thermal zones within your space. Give us a letter of assurance and some photographs of your adjustable height chairs. So a number of things are done by looking at some form of documentation that's there. But then, as I mentioned, a lot of the things are not something that you just like document with a drawing or a policy or a photo. Those take an on-site measurement, and that's the performance verification. So with air, water, light, sound, and thermal comfort, we have these features that are tested on site, where a well performance testing agent will go and bring a particulate matter counter, take a water sample to be sent to a lab, take measurements for reverberation time or for light and all of those. And so all of those are then analyzed, and once the performance testing agent has assessed that, yes, these meet the requirements, that's submitted, and that shows that the project has actually met those conditions within the space.
Oh, that's fantastic. Can I go off script just a little bit here?
Sure.
Who comes to you for certification? What are the types of, is there any sort of trends in, it tends to be hospitals, or it tends to be schools, or it tends to be office buildings led by, really forward thinking CEOs. Is there any sort of trends that you could share with us?
Sure. Liz, so let's cross-check after this and make sure everyone that I mentioned here is a public client. I think they are, but before this goes live, let's just make sure that. Oh, here we go. I would say commercial office buildings and commercial clients are our bread and butter. So these would be the large organizations such as JLL or CBRE or Lend-Lease that own buildings and rent them out to a number of tenants that are there. Or they would be corporate occupiers such as Citibank that are there within the space. We also have a number of small retail projects that have used the WELL system, whether it is Planet Fitness or T-Mobile have both used portions of WELL across all of their spaces. We have a small but growing contingent of multifamily residential buildings. And in fact, in the last 2 years, we've recently launched a pilot for WELL for residential that also includes single family residential. And that's started growing rapidly, and we will incorporate that into our WELL program in the future.
Okay, that's really cool. All right. The difference between WELL and WELL Core certification. Is there a difference? And if so, can you explain what the difference is?
Yeah, so in some of those examples that I just mentioned, WELL Core is a core and shell, or shell and core, or base building, depending where in the world you are, what it's called. And that is essentially the building is owned by the entities seeking our certification, and it's then rented out to a number of other companies that are there who are not necessarily involved with the certification. And those ones that base building, it's a lot of fundamental strategies that affect the overall building that's there, and that can help them really promote it to their tenants, to attract new tenants, to retain new tenants, to have really epitomize the Class A office building, so to speak. And then that is in comparison to what we call owner occupied, where that is the project owner is the same one occupying the building. So like a retail tenant, we're going to say is owner occupying because they're the ones seeking certification and they're the ones that's in the space. Or a corporate HQ would be owner occupied that's there. So that's sort of how the WELL Core certification and the WELL certification differ.
Now, does the occupant type affect the scoring for the certification in any way?
It does. So that owner-occupied WELL Core is the main thing that would differentiate scoring between the different types of occupants. And the reason for that has to do with the limited scope of many of the features in a WELL Core building and based on their limited control within the space. For example, if I have a skyscraper that I'm operating and there are 10 people in it that are helping to operate it, the facilities managers, the front desk, and whoever else, then if I might give them great parental leave, and I might install low flicker lights in the lobby and in some of the hallways, but in nowhere else because the tenants are going to be putting in their own lights. And that's great. Those are good things. But when it affects the 10 people that are running the building or the lobby that people walk through, it's not really having much of an effect on the 1,000 people that work in the spaces that the tenants are renting. So as a result of that, we do reward them, but the point value is reduced for those features. To make up for that, the strategies that affect everyone in the building have their point value increased. So, for example, access to mass transit or good daylight or bike parking or enhanced ventilation supply rates. Those ones, since those are affecting everyone in the space, are now worth more points compared to owner-occupied. So in total, the number of points is approximately the same between an owner-occupied project and a well-core project, but in a well-core project, they've been redistributed for the ones that affect more people within the space.
Oh, that's brilliant. I have to, again, I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent here, but you talked about, access to mass transit. Is the certification somewhat skewed for urban environments versus, say, suburban or rural type settings?
Yeah, I would say, there are certain features like you can hardly find a spot in Manhattan that is not going to automatically earn you the feature for access to mass transit, but that's also reflective of the fact that people who take mass transit tend to have more physical activity than people who drive. At the same time, there are other strategies that may be easier in some of these other areas. Some of it might be quite literal, like perhaps in urban areas, the air quality might be worse than in some other areas. So you might have to have a better quality HVAC system to meet the same thresholds inside. Or in particular, looking at sound. If you're next to an elevated train line, that may help you on access to transit, but in order to meet our background noise levels, you're going to need to have really good windows that are there to match it. And then others, like just looking at the amount of available space that's there, with some of them, like having dedicated rooms for relaxation, having a fitness area. You might be doing that in the Class A office in the city, but it's so dense that space at a premium, that might be harder than in a suburban or a rural setting, where it's a lot easier to just say, hey, let's go and throw a fitness area over there because we have more space than we know what to do with.
Manage the connection between building occupants and the outside world using Solera translucent glass. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Right, that's brilliant. Okay, let's talk about the concept of flexible optimizations. Can you define that and explain how that works?
Yeah. So for a project to become well certified, it has to meet all of the preconditions. These are approximately 24 features across all 10 of the concepts that we're saying are absolutely mandatory. You miss one of those and you cannot get certified. And above that, there are something more than 200 available points in these optimizations, these strategies that are great. They're good ideas, but they're not like they wouldn't single-handedly say that is not going to be a well building. That's there. So we encourage projects to go and flexibly pick between those. And if they say, hey, I can't really do much in sound, but I can give a great HR policy, then they can earn points that way. Or they can offer really healthy food, but I can't really manage my lights. So there's some flexible pathways there towards getting towards the thresholds of like 50 points for silver or 80 points for platinum. Now, we do expect that like the highest quality buildings do have distribution of the points across the board. So for the owner-occupied projects, like to get platinum, you do need 3 of the points in every one of the concepts. For silver, it's only 1 of the points. So still that flexibility that's there, but it's making sure that we don't have a platinum project where they completely ignored thermal comfort and water and got all of their points in nourishment and sound, say.
Yeah, so it eliminates, some unfairness that would occur that would be beyond the control of the occupant owner or the
Exactly. You
leasee.
bring up like access to a mass transit or the proximity to grocery stores or things like that. None of those are going to be preconditions. Those are great things that have a benefit, but we understand there are many projects that do not meet that and can be very healthy projects still. So those are all towards those flexible optimizations.
Yeah, okay. So there's one more definition that I'm not sure if they're similar, but the concept of the dynamic scorecard. Can you define that and tell us a little bit about it as well?
Yeah, so part of that is just the idea that with all of these features available, you have a wide selection to be able to pick which ones are appropriate for you. And in fact, the system is even set up to say that like you can't get more than 12 points within a single concept. Like once you've gotten those 12, it's time to go focus on another part of the standard. As I mentioned, there's over 200 points that are available, so that sometimes we found teams are a little bit lost on where to even begin. So within their scorecard, there are filters that are available where they can go and say, I want to see all of the features that are relevant to the HR manager, or I want to see all of the features that have a verification type of performance test. I want to see all of those where there's a crosswalk with lead v4.1, or all of them that have been tagged to a particular ESG topic that's there. So we have a number of filters within the program that can help teams drill down and select from what can seem like a lot of different available strategies.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I really like that. All right. So, Nathan, every single episode, I ask one question, the same question of every guest, and I tell them, please answer it from whatever perspective that you see fit. Okay. And that $1 million question is, what makes a great building?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that purpose is to describe what makes a great building and a great organization. I mean, I like to say that when we say well building standard, building is as much a verb as it is a noun when you look at a lot of the policies and the operations that's there. But the strategies that we live in, day out at IWBI that we help projects achieve, like all of those are what goes into making a great building.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful answer. All right. Before we go, Nathan, is there any news that you'd like to share? Anything exciting, upcoming events, or anything else that you'd like to promote?
I would encourage people who would like to get involved to look at our 2025 Global Event Series. We have flagship events in major cities such as New York and Sydney, and then regional summits all over the world. So go to check out our Global Event Series, and there will certainly be a place for you to come and see us and get involved.
Nathan, thank you so much. That was an extraordinary conversation. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the great work that your organization does.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I had a great time.
My pleasure. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.